Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Happy Independence Day to all of you watching us from India and to all Indians who are watching us from other parts of the world. Did you know that apart from India, 5 countries celebrate their Independence Day on the 15th of August? Bahrain, Congo, Liechtenstein, South Korea and North Korea. In India, the Prime Minister delivered a speech at the Red Fort today. We'll bring you the highlights and talk about the road ahead, both challenges and opportunities. In China, the unemployment numbers have touched record highs and foreign investors are leaving. So the government has decided to act, not by addressing the problem, but by not sharing the numbers anymore. Can't say we're surprised. Meanwhile, India's medical regulator is trying to break the nexus between doctors and pharma companies. The regulator has told doctors to stop prescribing branded drugs and switch to generic drugs instead. It's a complicated move. We'll tell you why. In other news, is Sri Lanka preparing to host another Chinese spy ship? Why the race for mining the moon is heating up, how Ethiopia is on the brink of another war, and how fairness creams can kill you. The headlines first. Ukraine shuts the power line supplying the Chernobyl power station. It comes amid a wave of Russian air attacks in western Ukraine. A cornered Kiev has stepped up pressure on the west. Zelensky's aide has called for banning Russian athletes from global sporting events. Clashes rock Libya's capital, the worst in months. Fighting erupts between 2 armed groups linked to the Tripoli-based government. The violence halts flights from the city's only civilian airport. Libya has had little peace since a NATO-backed uprising in 2011. Kenya reinstates fuel subsidy after months of protests. President Ruto had removed the subsidies in September 2022. He'd also increased taxes, leading to widespread public anger. The protests were called off last month after the opposition and Ruto agreed to talks. The German foreign minister calls off her Pacific tour. Problems with her government plane forced it to return to Abu Dhabi twice. The minister was stranded there for hours. It's the latest embarrassment involving the aging German fleet. The Taliban marked 2 years since their return to power in Afghanistan. They declared a public holiday to celebrate this occasion. Women have been the biggest casualty of their rule. The Taliban government is still not formally recognized by any country in the world. And Algeria joins the anti-Barbie party. It has banned the movie for promoting homosexuality. It joins Lebanon and Kuwait in barring the global box office hit.
ये भारत न रुकता है, ये भारत न थकता है, ये भारत न हाँफता है और न ही ये भारत हारता है।
76 years. It may seem like a long time for us humans, but for countries, it's not such a long time. In the grand scheme of things, India is still a young nation. Its people are young, its constitution is young, and its democracy is young. And that's what makes its achievements spectacular. What India has done in 76 years, countries have not been able to do in centuries. Whether it's economic progress or social justice or diplomatic influence, today we celebrated all those achievements. Indians all over the world did. And it is a day to celebrate. But it's also a day to look ahead. What will the next 76 years look like? What are the challenges? What are the objectives? How can India make the world a better place? Tonight we'll discuss all of that. But first, Let's see how the day unfolded. As always, it began with a grand ceremony at the Red Fort. Hundreds of people gathered to hear the Prime Minister's speech. Prime Minister Modi first went to Rajghat. He paid his respects to Mahatma Gandhi, and then he proceeded to the Red Fort. It was his 10th Independence Day address. It's a huge honor. Only 4 Prime Ministers in our history have made 10 Red Fort speeches: Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Dr. Manmohan Singh, and now Narendra Modi. He inspected the Guard of Honor. He unfurled the tricolour, and then the address began. It lasted around 90 minutes. The Prime Minister talked about a number of issues like the economy, the situation in Manipur, women empowerment, corruption, dynastic politics. He covered all of it. We are bringing you the 5 most important bits according to us. Number 1 is the economy. The Prime Minister has made an ambitious pledge today. He said India will be among the world's 3 largest economies in the next 5 years. Listen to this.
आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूं, आने वाले 5 साल में मोदी का गारंटी है, देश पहले 3 वैश्विक इकोनॉमी में अपना जगह ले लेगा। ये पक्का जगह ले लेगा।
Where does India rank at the moment? We are at number 5. The US and China are clear at number 1 and 2, but Japan and Germany are within range. The goal is to leapfrog them by 2028. Multiple reports have projected the same, including one by the State Bank of India. But the question is not just the size of the economy, it's also the quality of it. We'll come to that later. But point number 2 for the moment, it was on Manipur. The state has been gripped by ethnic violence since May this year. More than 140 people have been killed. More than 70,000 are displaced. The opposition has accused the Prime Minister of being silent on this. Today, he did speak about it. He said peace is gradually returning to the state. Listen to this.
दिनों से लगातार शांति की खबरें आ रही हैं। देश मणिपुर के लोगों के साथ है। देश मणिपुर के लोगों को पिछले कुछ दिनों से जो शांति बनाए रखी है, उस शांति के पर्व को आगे बढ़ाएं और शांति से ही समाधान का रास्ता निकलेगा। और राज्य और केंद्र सरकार मिलकर के उन समस्याओं के समाधान के लिए भरपूर प्रयास कर रही है, करती रहेगी।
Number 3 was India's role in global affairs. The Prime Minister was clear about one thing: the world order has changed. He compared the pandemic to the Second World War. Both events changed world politics. They created new power equations. The question is, what role does India play in this new world order? Prime Minister Modi says the role of a friend, a Vishwamitra, in his words.
हमारा राष्ट्रीय चरित्र विश्व मंगल के लिए सोचने वाला होना चाहिए। हमें देश को इतना मजबूत बनाना है जो विश्व मंगल के लिए भी अपनी भूमिका अदा करे। और आज कोरोना के बाद मैं देख रहा हूं जिस प्रकार से संकट की घड़ी में देश ने दुनिया की मदद की, उसका परिणाम है कि आज दुनिया में हमारा देश एक विश्व मित्र के रूप में, विश्व का अटूट साथी के रूप में आज मेरे देश की पहचान बनी है।
This ties in with India's foreign policy. Don't take sides, try to reduce differences, find common ground. Now, this Independence Day was an important one for Prime Minister Modi because next year is election year in India. We saw 2 shades of Narendra Modi today, both the Prime Minister and the politician. He accused opposition parties of dynastic politics. He also promised to return next year to the Red Fort. It was his way of saying that he will win in 2024. Listen to this.
आज मेरे देश के लोकतंत्र में एक ऐसी विकृति आई है जो कभी भारत के लोकतंत्र को मजबूती नहीं दे सकती। और वो क्या है बीमारी? परिवारवादी पार्टियां। और उनका तो मंत्र क्या है? पार्टी ऑफ द फैमिली, बाय द फैमिली एंड फॉर द फैमिली। और अगली बार 15 अगस्त को इसी लाल किले से मैं आपको देश की उपलब्धियां, आपके सामर्थ्य, आपके संकल्प, उसमें हुई प्रगति, उसकी जो सफलता है, उसके गौरवगान उससे भी अधिक आत्मविश्वास के सामने आपके सामने मैं प्रस्तुत करूंगा.
Politics aside, there is much to be proud of. The 1940s saw the emergence of many independent countries. Not all of them flourished. Some are living on IMF bailouts, some are terror havens, and some are political pariahs. India, though, is a major power in the making. We don't realize how priceless that is. Having said that, challenges remain. The Prime Minister himself talked about one of them: inflation. Retail prices surged 7.44% in the month of July. That's a 15-month high. The month before, in June, it was just 4.8%. So the trajectory is not looking good. Food prices are the worst affected. They were up by more than 11% in July. To give you some context, these numbers are much higher than the Reserve Bank of India's tolerance. They prefer inflation at around 4%. We have almost 8%. The Prime Minister acknowledged that more work needs to be done on this issue.
आज दुनिया महंगाई के संकट से जूझ रही है. पूरी दुनिया की अर्थव्यवस्था को महंगाई ने दबोच के रखा है. हम भी दुनिया से जिन सामान की जरूरत होती है लाते हैं, तो हमें सामान तो इंपोर्ट करते हैं. हमारा दुर्भाग्य है कि हमें महंगाई भी इंपोर्ट करनी पड़ती है. मुझे तो मेरे देशवासियों को महंगाई की बोझ कम से कम हो, इस दिशा में और भी कदम उठाने हैं और हम उस कदम को उठा के रहेंगे. मेरा प्रयास निरंतर जारी रहेगा.
Another challenge is economic equality. We talk about becoming the 5th largest economy in the world or the 3rd largest economy. But what is the quality of this growth? Is everyone benefiting from it? I have some numbers for you. In India, the richest 1% of the population owns around 40% of the wealth. The top 5% owns 62% of the wealth. This is gross inequality. Let's look at the last decade. From 2012 to 2021, only 3% of the wealth generated went to the bottom 50% of the population. 97% went to the top half. Again, gross inequality. We need to fix this gap. India's economic pie is certainly getting bigger. Chances are it will become the 3rd largest economy by 2028, but we need to share that pie better. I know it's easier said than done, but the last 76 years have been nothing short of a miracle. If anyone can do it, it's India. So after 76 years of independence, India is projecting confidence. China, on the other hand, is losing it. Their economy is showing signs of serious trouble. The numbers do not look good. So what does the Communist Party of China do? Stop sharing them. That's the decision they took today. China will now not release their youth unemployment data. In June, it had crossed the 20% mark. That's a record high. 20% unemployment means 1 out of 5 young people in China does not have a job. And China has a lot of them, a lot of young people. 96 million people are between 16 and 24 years of age. That's the youth of the country. 20% of them do not have a job, did not have a job in June. What about the numbers in July? Well, China has not released them. And today they declared that they will not release unemployment data. You may ask why, and we have the answer from the horse's mouth. Listen to this.
Starting from August this year, the nationwide urban unemployment rate for different age groups, particularly among the youth, will temporarily cease to be released. The main reason for this is due to the ongoing development of the economy and society, which requires continuous improvement in statistical practices. Survey statistics of our labor force also need further enhancement and optimization.
We need to improve the process. That's the explanation from Beijing. The focus should be on improving the job situation, but China wants to fix the process. It won't help. This year, more than 11 million students are graduating from college in China. That's the highest number of graduates China has seen ever. So they're churning out more professionals. But the job creators cannot keep up with this supply. Even the Chinese government is not being able to create these jobs. Every year, China holds a national civil service exam. This is to fill entry-level positions in the civil service. Last year, 37,100 positions were advertised. But do you know how many graduates appeared for the exam? A record 2.6 million. Needless to say, the Chinese government did not hire everyone. In fact, that would be an unfair expectation. No government can be expected to employ everyone. No government can create millions of vacancies every year. But in China, the government is also devoid of empathy. Xi Jinping is dishing out advice for the jobless. Last month, he told them to pick up their bags and move to the countryside. In fact, let me quote from what he said. They should learn to eat bitterness. That's a Chinese expression. To eat bitterness is to endure hardships. So the president is basically telling graduates to take up hard labor in the countryside. Obviously, they don't like it. And today, Beijing decided to suspend unemployment data. It is trending on Chinese social media. The decision is being heavily criticized. Let me show you some comments from Weibo, which is their version of Twitter or X. One user says, and I'm quoting, "Covering your mouth and closing your eyes, can that really solve problems? With flexible employment, slow employment and independent employment, working for just 1 hour means you're not unemployed. Don't take the statistics from the Bureau of Statistics seriously." Here's another one. "As long as I don't announce it, then nobody is unemployed." You see, youth unemployment is a serious issue in every country, and China is no different. Students go to college because they want well-paying jobs. They want to build skills in their chosen field of study. They want to become professionals, not laborers in the countryside. Ignoring their plight has cost governments dearly. In democracies, you can be voted out of power. But even in a dictatorship like China, unemployment can lead to serious problems. And Chinese experts have been issuing warnings about this. In the month of June, a leading think tank published a report. It said rising unemployment could lead to internal instability. Let me quote from that report. "If it is not handled properly, it will cause other social problems beyond the economy, and it could even ignite the fuse of political problems." I'll repeat that last part. It could ignite the fuse of political problems. This is the worst fear of the Communist Party of China. They cannot handle any challenge to their authority. So the only way out would be to create jobs and try to diffuse this. How do you do that? How do you create jobs? By attracting more investment. But even that is an uphill task. Foreign investors are not interested in China anymore. Look at the numbers. This month, Chinese markets witnessed a sell-off. Overseas investors dumped Chinese shares. Do you know what was the value of their trade? More than $5 billion. This could be the biggest exit from Chinese markets since October last year. And what happened in October last year? That's when China was pushing with its zero COVID policy. When the economy couldn't take it anymore, China scrapped zero COVID. For a while, it did help. The growth rate improved, but it did not last. China soon lost the momentum. Their economy was struck by the perfect storm: a sinking real estate sector, rising levels of debt, falling investment, and now record high unemployment. The dragon cannot play ostrich and get away with it. Back to India now, and there is a new standoff between doctors and the governments. Oh, what? Prescriptions. And no, this is not about the handwriting. It's about something more serious. The National Medical Commission, or the NMC, has issued a notice. It's an Indian regulatory body, the National Medical Commission. All doctors must follow what the NMC says. And one of their directives stood out. They've told doctors to stop prescribing branded drugs. Instead, they should prescribe generic drugs. Let me explain what this means. Suppose you have a fever. You go to your family doctor or any doctor. In the past, he or she may have given you a Dolo or a Calpol. Those are branded drugs. Now the regulator is telling them to stop doing this. So what should they do? They should prescribe the generic name of the drug. In this case, it would be paracetamol. So instead of asking you to take a Dolo, your doctor must say, have paracetamol. What is the difference? The branding is the difference. Most medicines are patented by pharma companies. Like Dolo is made by a company called Microlabs. Calpol is made by Johnson & Johnson. Now, these are not lifelong patents. When they expire, other companies are free to replicate these drugs. The color may be different, the shape and taste may be different, the cost too may be different, but one thing remains constant, and that is the active ingredients used to make the medicine. So basically, it's the same drug minus the brand. That's a generic medicine. Now, I know you have more questions. For starters, why is the government doing this? Also, why should you care? We'll try to answer both and more. The government is doing this because of the cost. Generic medicines are cheaper than branded ones. The price difference is anywhere between 30 and 80%. So when your doctor asks you to take a cheaper medicine, the overall cost of healthcare comes down. Your medical bill comes down. That's what the government is trying to do. Make medicines more affordable. That's the idea. Sounds great, right? But doctors have flagged certain concerns. The IMA, or the Indian Medical Association, is protesting against this decision. And this is very significant because the IMA is the largest body of doctors in India. They represent around 350,000 doctors. And the IMA has some tough words for this order. They say it's like, quote unquote, running trains without tracks. Why do they say this? Well, they have raised three concerns. Number one, the quality of generic medicines. It's not good enough. India's drug regulator conducted a survey in the year 2018. It found that 4.5% of all generic drugs were substandard. And this is a huge problem. Branded drugs are researched, tested, and patented. Do generic drugs have the same quality? Doctors say, not yet. Concern number two, availability. Go to your local pharmacist and ask for a generic drug. Chances are they won't have it because the margins are simply not viable. Medical stores make a lot more money by selling branded drugs, so that's what they do. Why would they sell generic ones? And this brings us to concern number three. What will pharmacists do if the generic drug is not available? They will find a branded substitute. Another drug which does the same job, that's what they'll recommend. Now, do you see the problem here? The medical store does not know which drug is better for you. They've probably stocked the most expensive version. So not only will you not get the generic drug, you end up getting the most expensive version of it. Needless to say, it's counterproductive. So the question is, what is the way forward? There is no denying that generic drugs are important. They save people a lot of money. We have numbers from the United States, for instance. In the last 10 years, generic drugs have saved the health industry $2.2 trillion in the US. That's a lot of money. The global generic drug industry is worth around $430 billion. By 2030, it is projected to reach $670 billion. So there is demand. But how do you get doctors on board? How do you break the doctor-pharma nexus while also ensuring the safety of patients? And there is no denying that there is such a nexus. It is true that Big Pharma pays doctors to prescribe their drugs. I'm sure you've all experienced it. Doctors give you medicines which are easiest to find in medical stores near them. Everyone gets a cut. Just think back to last year. The makers of Dolo were taken to court. They were accused of giving doctors freebies worth 1,000 crore rupees. So commissions do exist. But that's only one side of the story. The other side is this. The doctor-patient relationship is based on trust and familiarity. Your doctor knows which drug is best for you, which combination is best for you. Sometimes it may not be a generic drug. So you can't have a blanket rule for all cases. Yes, generic drugs should be promoted, but only after ensuring that their quality is top class. Track first, then train. What we need is more testing labs. What we need is stricter quality control. Only then will doctors and patients trust generic drugs. And the government knows this. In February, they set aside $79 million to strengthen drug regulation in India. So the idea is positive. We're thinking in the right direction, but we need more checks in place. Have you heard of the term sugar high? It's when you consume too much sugar and your energy levels shoot up. Donald Trump is dealing with something similar. You could call it the indictment high, meaning the more he gets indicted, the more support he gets. His legal troubles are earning him more popularity. Today he's been indicted again, the fourth time since March. And this time he's been charged with election meddling in the state of Georgia. If the idea was to ruin his electoral prospects, it has boomeranged. Donald Trump is still the Republican frontrunner. His party is still rallying behind him. And at this rate, who knows, he might even win the election next year. But what does it say about America and its voters? Also, its lack of options. Very old, white, controversial men leading the presidential race. Here's a report.
Donald Trump may have starred in reality TV shows, but his real life can rival some TV plot lines. Trump became president in 2016.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Lost the election in 2020, tried to overturn the results, and since then has been indicted a record 4 times.
Today, based on information developed by that investigation, a Fulton County grand jury returned a true bill of indictment, charging 19 individuals with violations of Georgia law arising from a criminal conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election in this state.
This latest indictment came in Georgia. Trump has been charged with racketeering and a string of election crimes. Why? Because he tried to overturn his defeat to Joe Biden in the state. This means that the former US president is now facing 4 criminal indictments. But an increasingly furious Trump is vowing to fight on. His rhetoric hasn't changed a bit since 2020. In fact, Trump is using these indictments to boost his campaign. Each time Donald Trump is indicted, he gets a bump in opinion polls. And in turn, raises some serious campaign cash. They don't damage his image. Instead, it gives him valuable political capital. This is a country where winning the White House costs billions of dollars. And Trump knows that. So he uses his indictments to raise money. Since being charged, Trump has sent his supporters similar messages. They all read the same. Trump calls the indictments a witch hunt. He calls Biden a tin pot dictator, and then he asks his supporters to donate to save America. So far, the strategy is working. After his first indictment in New York, Donald Trump's team raised over $4 million in 24 hours. The second indictment led to over $7 million in donations. With each new investigation, the Republican has benefited, and many are calling it the indictment bump. But how long will this indictment high last? Trump and his entourage may be happy, but these cases are a double-edged sword. These indictments are having an impact on his campaign funds. Trump has no choice but to dip into the campaign coffers, especially to pay millions of dollars in legal fees. The same money can instead be used for television ads, rallies, or campaign swings nationwide. At the beginning of 2022, Trump's Save America Political Action Committee had over $100 million. In July, it has only about $3.6 million in cash on hand. So Trump's legal expenses are through the roof. His indictments are not going away. But the Republicans are not giving up. For them, he is their sole hope at the presidency. And they're rallying hard behind him. But the question is, why? Why do they have no other option except him? In fact, the bigger question is, why does America have no other options except old white men? In 2020, 3 people were frontrunners in the presidential race: Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Bernie Sanders. They were divided on ideology, but when it came to age, they were very much united. All 3 of them were born in the 1940s, even before the independence of India. Imagine that. Does that mean there are no options? Of course not. Voters seem to think it's a problem. They voice concern over lack of youth in US politics, and especially in the presidential race. Almost 90% support a cutoff of 75 years old for serving as president. The average age of the US Congress is 59 years. The average age of the Senate is 63 years. Now, let's look at the US population. In 2018, the most common age for all Americans was 27. So why are US government officials so old? That's because running for Congress takes money, political skills, and a significant network. Older people have all 3. White Americans have it even more. Older people also make up over 50% of the electorate. So basically, older people are running more, and they're also voting more. 2024 is likely to be no different, because when it comes to the White House, it's only raining men, old and white.
And staying with the US, our next story may be triggering. It's the story of a 13-year-old girl from Mississippi. Last year, she was doing what kids do, playing right outside her home. That's when she was raped by a stranger. She ended up getting pregnant. She wanted, needed an abortion, but she couldn't get it. Do you know why? Because the law in America does not allow it. So now this 13-year-old child has given birth to a baby, and soon she will start 7th grade. It's a horrifying story. It should fill you with rage. America should be ashamed for what it's doing to this child and others like her. They've banned or heavily restricted abortion in more than 20 states. A decision came from the US Supreme Court last year. In one fell swoop, it struck down the federal rights to abortion. It denied 25 million American women the right over their bodies, including this child who has now been forced to become a mother at 13. Last year, a woman in Louisiana got pregnant. She was carrying a fetus with no skull, meaning her baby would die soon after birth. She sought an abortion. She was denied it. In Ohio, a woman was carrying triplets. She had a high risk of dangerous complications. She wanted an abortion, again denied. This is the reality of life in America. Women have been forced to return to a time half a century ago. That's when abortion was last illegal across most American states. And what was the result? Women who could travel out of a state to seek an abortion did so. Others unwillingly carried pregnancies to term or tried to end them on their own. It was unregulated and dangerous. Women turned to coat hangers and chemicals. Even unskilled abortion providers. Back in the 1960s, more than 4,000 women in Chicago went through this. They suffered life-threatening effects of botched abortions. This is what America is turning back to. Hospitals are turning away patients, and these women don't really have a choice. Their reproductive rights have been taken away from them. So some resort to back alley abortions. Others turn to underground networks of abortion pills. This has been on the rise since last year. In what world is this okay? Yet America fails to see this. Republicans said that they would make allowances with exceptions. Like in rape cases or when life is at risk, they will allow an abortion. But guess what? In the last 1 year, only 2 exceptions have been allowed. You don't need to be a doctor to know that the number should be much higher than this. Here's what experts say. There is no reliable estimate for patients who seek abortion due to assault or complications. We don't have data. But doctors know that the number is far higher than just 2. Birth defects kill at least 6,200 babies in America every year. Studies say most women who discover a deadly birth defect seek an abortion. According to a survey in 2017, 15% of American women became pregnant as a result of rape. That's about 3.4 million women. Yet only 2 women were allowed to get abortions this past year. American politicians can defend these draconian laws, but the numbers tell the real story of their country. So do women's accounts. In Ohio, a cancer patient broke down. She was refused an abortion. In the same state, at least 3 women threatened to commit suicide. A woman in Texas almost died because she could not get an abortion on time. She ended up in intensive care with sepsis. A Wisconsin woman was left bleeding for 10 days after incomplete miscarriage. And these are adults. What about children? In 2021, dozens of Ohio girls under 14 had abortions. Same for Kentucky. But now even children are being victimized. They're doomed to carry pregnancies to term. Even victims of rape. 13-year-old girls who are going to 7th grade. It is jarring, both physically and emotionally. These abortion laws are a cruel punishment. Women and girls suffer them every day in America. This is the harrowing reality of life in the United States, where the law allows you to wield a gun but not get an abortion. Children can get killed in schools, but unborn fetuses must be saved by law. They call it pro-life. It's the worst kind of vote bank politics. Planet Earth has enough problems to fix, but our world leaders have other priorities. Their newest obsession is mining on the moon. Last week, Russia launched a new lunar mission, their first one in 47 years. What is the goal of the mission? Moscow wants to uncover the moon's secrets. It is believed that many natural elements exist on the moon and they could be mined. But Russia is not the only country that's interested, of course. The US, China and India too are in this race. Our next report tells you about the latest gold rush in space.
The moon has become interesting for space watchers again. Last week, Russia launched a lunar mission. The Russians are returning to the moon after 47 years. America's NASA has its own plans. It's working on a new program called Artemis. NASA's goal is to fly humans to the moon again, a first in over 50 years. China has its own plans to study the lunar surface. And as this report plays on your screens, India's Chandrayaan-3 is flying around the moon as well.
Plus 5 seconds.
Suddenly, the moon has a lot of company. This isn't happening out of the blue. World powers have kicked off a new space race. They think it could be the next gold mine for natural resources. Earlier, the moon wasn't believed to be that useful. But in 2008, that perception changed. That year, India launched the Chandrayaan-1. It made an important discovery. It found water on the moon's surface. Not in a way you would expect. There were no lakes, oceans, or even puddles. Water on the moon exists in the form of molecules, formed by hydrogen and oxygen. This was an important discovery. Water is important, not just for humans to sustain themselves. Elements like hydrogen and oxygen are used to make rocket fuel. But that's not the only thing world powers are after. Experts believe the moon has more elements. One of them could be helium-3. It's a rare element and an important component for nuclear energy. It plays a role in producing energy inside a reactor. Helium-3 is a clean fuel too. It doesn't produce any dangerous waste. But helium-3 is hard to come by on Earth. However, NASA thinks there is ample supply on the moon, as much as 1 million tons if some estimates turn out to be right. The moon's vast surface may have more treasures, like iron, titanium, aluminium, magnesium, even silicon, which is now found in almost every gadget. But how would you extract all these minerals? No one has figured out a way yet. Experts say moon mining might not be economically viable. And with the current technology, it is impossible for humans to dig up the moon and haul its minerals back to planet Earth. Then why explore the idea in the first place? Because the moon's rich resources could serve a different purpose. They could help humans in building permanent bases on the moon. The supply of minerals could be used for construction. And once humans start living on the moon, they won't have to worry about bringing water from Earth. Permanent bases on the moon will boost space exploration. With their help, humans will be able to stay in space longer. This presence will enable missions that go deep into unexplored territories. But these ambitious plans face serious roadblocks. There are no clear laws or rules to mine space yet. And the existing protocols are riddled with loopholes. Right now, there is only one international treaty that applies to all UN members, the Outer Space Treaty of 1966. It says no nation can claim sovereignty over the moon, and space exploration should be carried out for everyone's benefit. But this treaty doesn't say if anyone can claim sovereignty over a part of the moon. This ambiguity is now fueling competition. So, the next time an astronaut plants a flag on the moon, other space programs will be watching closely. And it could be more than a symbolic gesture.
Sri Lanka is preparing to welcome a ship. Not just any ship, it's a Chinese research vessel. It's called Shiyan-6. It is expected to arrive at the Colombo port in October. Now, officially, Sri Lanka has not said anything. Their Navy says, we are unaware. But reports say permission will be granted soon. And it won't be surprising because this won't be the first Chinese vessel in Sri Lanka, the first such Chinese vessel. One of them arrived last week. A warship with surveillance capabilities. It's around 129 meters long. It is manned by 138 sailors. This warship arrived in Sri Lanka on Friday. It stayed overnight and left on Saturday. That was not the original plan, though. The warship was set to arrive much earlier. It was delayed because of India's concerns. India raised some concerns. Reports say Sri Lanka briefed Indian officials on this warship. Only then was permission granted. The government of India did not confirm this report, but it did say that all developments were being monitored. Listen in.
I've seen reports of a Chinese ship there. I'm not sure whether it is a warship or not. I will only say that having seen these reports, I would emphasize the government carefully monitors any development having a bearing on India's security interests and takes all necessary measures to defend them.
Now, there is talk of a second voyage. The Shiyan 6 is based in Guangzhou. It is currently in the South China Sea. It is sailing towards Sri Lanka. Reports say it will arrive by late October. It will stay on in Colombo until the next month. So the voyages are becoming more brazen. There was a similar one last year. China's Yuan Wong 5 vessel docked in Hambantota in Sri Lanka. India had objected, but Sri Lanka went ahead. The second voyage came almost a year later in August 2023, but the third one is slated for October, so the gap between them is shrinking. Why is India concerned about this? Because of two reasons. Number one, strategic concerns. India believes these Chinese ships will snoop on military assets, and knowing China, it's certainly possible. They keep sending so-called research vessels to Sri Lanka, but all of them have dual functions. Yes, they can conduct research, but if need be, they can also snoop. Reason number two is influence. Sri Lanka was part of India's sphere of influence. Now you have Chinese warships docking there. Clearly, it's an affront. Sri Lanka's president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, visited India last month. He promised that such things would not happen. He said Sri Lanka will not become a base to threaten India. His envoy to New Delhi went a step further. He said India's security, Sri Lanka's security. Great words. But days later, Chinese spy ships are heading to Colombo. What do we make of this? Sri Lanka is clearly saying one thing but doing another. And frankly, it was predictable. China owns around 20% of Sri Lanka's external debt. More Chinese firms are entering their market. The latest one is Sinopec. It's a Chinese oil company. It will start Lankan operations next month. My point is very simple here. Sri Lanka may want to distance themselves from China, but they're in no position to do so. The loans give China considerable influence over Sri Lanka. The question now is, how far will Beijing push Colombo? Just look at what happened last week. Sri Lanka decided to join the RCEP. It stands for Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. It's a trade bloc dominated by China. More importantly, India is not a member of this bloc. We exited the talks in 2019, so financially, China is pushing Sri Lanka a lot. Same story with the military. More and more Chinese warships are sailing to Lankan ports, which makes you wonder what is going to happen next. Could there be a military base in Sri Lanka? A Chinese military base in Sri Lanka? A new report says it's very much possible. In fact, Hambantota is among China's top options for a naval base. They've already invested close to $2 billion there, plus they virtually own it. The Hambantota port was handed over to China on a 99-year lease. India will be hoping that things won't get to that. Trade and investments are one thing, but hosting spy vessels is a red line. India has let it slide twice. But for how much longer? That's a question both Sri Lanka and India will be thinking about. And now let's turn our attention to Africa, to East Africa this time. Our story tonight comes from Ethiopia. It is Africa's second most populous nation. It has declared a state of emergency. Violent clashes have erupted in the country again. Until 9 months ago, they had a civil war going. That was in the Tigray region. Now the neighboring Amhara region is on fire. Clashes have been seen for months now. Things are steadily getting worse. Tensions began escalating in April. Last weekend, things came to a head. Let me give you a quick timeline of recent events. On Friday, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed declared a state of emergency in Ethiopia. Then reports emerged of Amhara people being arrested in large numbers. This is from across the country, across Ethiopia, but especially in the capital, Addis Ababa. Now, Ethiopia has many ethnic groups. The Amhara are one of them. In fact, they're the second largest ethnic group in the country. They make up almost 27% of Ethiopia's population. So to target these people, the Amhara people, is a dangerous move. The Ethiopian government is denying it. They've rubbished the reports of mass arrests. But here's what else has happened. On Sunday, the government conducted airstrikes, again in the Amara region. This was in the early hours of Sunday morning. 26 people were killed in those airstrikes. More than 50 others were gravely injured. They were gathered at a crowded town square. The target of the airstrikes was a local militia they called Fano militia. They've been accused of inciting unrest in the region. And then yesterday, Ethiopia's parliament approved the state of emergency.
Related peace and security issues shake the constitutional order, present a danger to the sovereignty of the country and public peace and safety. Therefore, to stop the situation, declaring a state of emergency has become necessary.
So why is violence in Amara on the rise? What has led to this present situation? Reports say the present conflict has its roots in the Tigray War. Tigray is Ethiopia's northernmost region. It shares a border with the Amara region. The Amara people were caught in the crossfire in Tigray. Some, in fact, even decided to participate. Local brigades, like the Fano militia, fought in the Tigray War. These fighters used to be allied with the government in Addis Ababa. They pushed northwards. They captured territory in Tigray. Some of them saw it as land grab. They thought it was reward for their service to the Ethiopian government. But that was not the case. When the Tigray War ended last November, the regional borders went back to what they were. So no new land for the Amara militias. They weren't happy with this. And what the government did next did not help. It wanted to absorb local militias into the armed forces to reduce their power and influence. The militias resisted. In April, a senior official from Ethiopia's ruling political party was killed. It is believed to be the work of the Fano militia. The government responded. And since then, there have been clashes. And while the parliament approved an emergency, it also warned against resorting to violence.
To solve this issue justly, the solution is not to use military power like it was used in another part of the country, but rather political dialogue. The beginning and the end of the problem is political.
That was Ethiopia's former foreign minister. He's also served as the president of the Amara region from 2013 to 2019. He says the solution is not another civil war. The solution is dialogue. But you see, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has a complicated legacy. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. He is hailed for ending a 20-year conflict between Ethiopia and Eritrea, their neighbors. But he's also the man who oversaw the Tigray War. It was brutal and deadly. Ethiopian soldiers have been accused of running riot in Tigray under the watch of their peace laureate Prime Minister. And now another region is on the brink of war in Ethiopia. Abiy Ahmed needs to find a peaceful solution to this conflict, or his Nobel Prize and his reputation will forever remain tainted with the blood of fellow Ethiopians. And now, on the occasion of India's Independence Day, let's talk about something we haven't gotten independence from. Not yet. Our obsession with fairness and skin lightening products. Fairness products may have been rebranded in India. Now they come with different names. Skin lightening creams, face glow serums and what have you. But their goal remains the same. Turning your skin a few shades lighter and destroying your self-esteem in the process. It isn't just India that deals with the skin lightening plague. You'll see similar obsessions all across Asia where fairness is equated with beauty and social status. And for whatever reason, from societal pressure to personal preference, people apply these products religiously. It's a free world. You can choose what you want to do. But are you making an informed choice? Do you know what these creams are doing to you? Do you know that these can even kill you? New research is out. It sheds light on the dangers of skin lightening products. Here's a report.
How do you feel about putting poison on your skin or something that could cause disease? Maybe lead to cancer, kidney failure, or even blindness. You probably wouldn't want to risk this, right? But if you regularly use fairness products, that's exactly what you're risking. Whenever you see advertisements about fairness products, think about what they show you. Fair, glowing, blemish-free skin, an instant boost in confidence, one's love life and work life all coming together. They all paint a fair and lovely picture, but they don't really talk about what goes into the products that they're hawking. Things like mercury. Mercury is known to be poisonous, to harm your organs. People can and have gone blind because of mercury. Mercury can also enter your bloodstream. wreak havoc on your internal organs, leading to things like kidney failure. And this may get passed on to children as well. Then there are ingredients like hydroquinone. It's a medical lightening agent. It stops the production of melanin. Melanin is what colors our skin, gives us our pigmentation. By inhibiting melanin production, people will become fairer, though it's more accurate to say they will become pale. So some fairness products contain melanin inhibitors like hydroquinone, which is also a known carcinogen. It will kill your melanin production and maybe you as well. It's banned in some places like Japan, Australia and the EU, but it can still be found in other countries like India and other South Asian nations. Places where people desire fairness so much that they don't read the warning labels. Fairness obsession is an ingrained part of Asian society. It's linked to caste in South Asia and equated with beauty across the continent. In ancient times, dark skin was taken to mean someone who worked outdoors in the sun, a sign of poverty. That age-old classist thinking has warped itself into Asian beauty standards today, and the cosmetics industry has been profiting from these antiquated norms. Cosmetics companies prey on insecurity and low self-confidence all over the world. But in Asia in particular, this obsession with whiteness is a gold mine for them. They can put dangerous chemicals in any cream, peddle temporary treatments as some sort of panacea, and basically take their customers for a ride. Remember, most fairness treatments are temporary. They may make you pale for a time, but your natural skin pigmentation has a habit of fighting back, and it usually comes back with a vengeance. But by then, the corrupt cosmetics companies and dodgy dermatologists have made off with your money. You're stuck with your original skin tone, a host of diseases, and probably some low self-esteem. This vicious cycle needs to end. Our obsession with fair skin needs to end, and the vultures profiting from this plague need to be punished. But until we change these millennia-old social norms, many will unknowingly pay a deadly price for skin lightening scams. So, read those warning labels closely.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with the United States. Hawaii witnessed devastating wildfires. We've been telling you about them. It was the deadliest wildfire in the US in more than 100 years. We'll show you before and after images of Hawaii. Meanwhile, a video from Arizona is going to unlock a new fear for you. A woman came home to a giant snake camping in her toilet. And the sky across the Balkans was lit up with meteor lights. You don't want to miss this. Finally, we're taking you back in history. Like I said at the beginning of the show, it's not just India's Independence Day today. 5 other countries got independence, including the Republic of Congo. On this day in 1960, Congo gained full independence from France. It is also known as the Congolese National Day. We leave you with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.